Welcome back, guys. Today I want to talk about a topic which has often been requested. How do I analyze with a chess engine? We all have to nowadays. It's hard to get around it, even though it would be nice, but everyone is simply well prepared. But it is very important to find like a middle ground, which, to also stay connected to reality and not only to follow the engine everywhere and just blindly listen to it. And it's very difficult for me to make this video because everyone has to find their own system to find the right balance between human chess and computer chess. But I want to make this video first of all to show you all of the different tools I use, and then hopefully to shine some light onto how to find ideas nowadays. And I want to start the view here in ChessBase, which I assume many of you are using who are already quite ambitious players. ChessBase is a software which most ambitious players do have, because it's simply a great software for storing files and also for analyzing with engines on your own hardware. So what you can do here is to install different engines. The one which is widely used is Stockfish, the most recent version being Stockfish 18. What you can also do if you have a strong graphics card is install your own Lila. If some of you don't know, let me turn on my Stockfish here. My ChessBase is in German, but there is a button up there where you can, there are two buttons. The first one is here. These are all of the different engines which I have, which you can see right here. Hopefully this time all of the different windows can be seen. I'm mostly using on my own hardware. I have a pretty strong PC. I'm mostly using Stockfish 18. And I did install Lila some time ago. I could also record a tutorial on how to do that, because it's not as simple as installing Stockfish. If some of you are interested in that, let me know. There are already some tutorials out there. But if you're curious how I did it, then let me know. But mostly I am using my Stockfish here because actually, to be completely honest, I think I messed something up with the installation of my Lila. So somehow the results are not fully promising. So what I do to use Lila is mostly use the cloud engines, which is what we're going to next. But let's stick to that. If I turn on the engine here I can take my Stockfish. You can adjust how strong it is going to be. Here I have 16 CPUs. I can turn it up all the way to 32 on my PC. Now I put 31, but I don't want it to crash now, so I'm just going to put it on one CPU. Obviously, if you're going to use more of your power, then your PC is going to run slower. Maybe there is also a chance that some things are going to crash. So usually I don't use all of my cores for analyzing, because anyway, 16 CPUs or something in between, like 16, 24 or something, is usually more than enough. How you can also see the power of the engine is the nodes here. So now it says about 1000 nodes per second, kilonodes, I think it says, kilonodes per second. This is one measurement to see how strong the engine is. To be completely honest, I'm not sure like what is a good node per second. I mean, how I'm usually analyzing like those 16,000 kilonodes per second, I think this is pretty decent. But if you're analyzing on a laptop, I think what I usually got was like something like 4,000 or something. Like, you can get around with that. Sometimes you're just gonna need to wait a little bit longer for it to reach a bigger depth. But I wouldn't be too focused on that in general. Which brings me also to another thing. Like, all of this, which I'm saying here, is already for highly ambitious chess players that want to bring up, that want to level up their opening analysis even more. I would not recommend any of this to anyone who is probably below a certain rating, like even 2200 or so, because I think before that, you really should focus on other areas of your play and mostly get your opening knowledge out of different videos or courses or books, because I think before that level, it can be difficult to find your own ideas and to implement them. I mean, you can try to use the online database and try to use the engine, but I think it's pretty difficult if you are not on a specific level yet to do all of that on your own. I also did not analyze all of my openings just from day one. I gathered a lot of different material from books and then tried to use that, and then slowly started building my own repertoire from that by using the ideas of different authors and trying to understand their way of finding ideas. And this is how you slowly are going to become able to come up with your own ideas. So this is the first step, and it's definitely more than enough. I know many strong players that are only analyzing with Stockfish, because also nowadays Stockfish has a specific component which is also found in Lila Zero, which we're going to go to next. It's since they implemented this NNUE. Actually, not entirely sure now what it stands for, but it sort of resembles Lila a little bit more now to use this kind of LLM approach, or whatever it's called. But still, I like to use Lila to this day. I don't always use it, but especially if we are in some positions where there's already a lot of theory and where I'm already, you could call it desperate to come up with new ideas, this is often the case where I turn on Lila. Which brings us to this line I put in here. I've mentioned this in one of my opening idea videos. This is what I played in the Sligo Open against International Master Krastev. I found this idea with 95 pretty briefly before the game, and then just went for it after like 5 or 10 minutes of analyzing. Now, you see also here another thing I should mention, that if you show more lines here in ChessBase, now we see 4 different lines, then the engine is going to run slower. So you need to find the right balance. Usually I have 3 to 4. To see all of the different suggestions, but if you turn it on to like many different lines, then it's just going to become much slower, because the engine has to calculate all of these different branches. So I don't really think this has so much sense behind it. So what I usually do is to have like 3 or 4 different lines. I think that's a good balance, at least for me personally. Now in the game, you see I played a move which is not even in the top 4. Now how I found this was because I already know that knight e5 is often a typical idea in those positions. So finding new ideas, usually nowadays it won't happen simply alone by turning on the engine, because most people, they can do the same as well, turn on the engine, and that's why they already played those ideas. So it's often a mix between both of them. Now already the evaluation anyway goes down a little bit, but still it's not in the top 4 moves here. Now it is the 4th move, but it has not been played, at least not much. Yeah, there are only 3 games. Online database, of course, very important. In ChessBase, you can open that by clicking the enter button. Now I want to show you something else. If you are not familiar with that yet, you can go on analysis in ChessBase and then open cloud engines up there. This is something I very, very often use, especially if I'm on my laptop and if I don't have a strong hardware. Now, what you can do here is to rent out engines and then use them to analyze, basically. So you have to pay a little bit of money. They are not expensive. These are the prices in ducats, which you have to divide by 10. And then to get the actual price, like 0.20 ducats, which I have open now, should be 2 cents per minute if I'm not mixing things up now, which I don't think is that much, at least if you don't let it run by accident for a couple of hours. Usually it's quite efficient. It goes up all the way now. The most expensive one is 5 ducats, which is 50 cents per minute, which I don't use personally at all. Like if I'm really in a rush or if there's something very important to analyze, what I do is often to pick something like 0.5 or so per minute, then it's already very strong. And yeah, if I'm casually analyzing something, then often like 0.30 or something if I'm on the go and not at home. Now, since my personal Lila is not working as well as I wish, even though it should be, because I have a pretty strong graphics card, I very often use the Lila here as well to analyze, because this is what I mentioned earlier. Now I've just loaded it and now it is active. Let's close that window again. Here, now I have the Lila running, which I just rented. As I said, it's not expensive. You can buy the ducats on ChessBase. And now let's compare the different engines with each other. So I have Lila now on 4 CPUs. Another thing, please correct me if I'm wrong here, at least it's something I heard a long time ago, and I think it still stands to this day, that Lila does not use your CPU at all. At least this is what I heard, and it only uses the graphics card. So the CPUs here should not matter. Like even if you have Lila running on your own hardware, it shouldn't really matter if you turn it on 1 CPU or 4 CPUs. I think it only uses the graphics card. So now we see here the 2 different engines. Both of them don't really show 95. Stockfish does show it a little bit. So this is how I often analyze, especially if it's something really important and I want to come up with new ideas. I have both of those engines running. And yeah, then I can compare the different ideas with each other. Often the evaluation is similar, now it is, but sometimes you can use different ideas from Lila and try to play it out against Stockfish or try to understand it by yourself. Specifically what I said earlier, if there's some position which is very well analyzed and it's difficult to come up with new ideas, then Lila often is quite helpful because not as many people are using Lila as they are using Stockfish. Now, small disclaimer, if you're using Lila, it might often be the case that Lila might be blundering something. This is something you need to be aware of. That's why it is a good idea to always have Stockfish running in the background, because Lila has this thing that sometimes it's blundering some more easy tactical things, and in general is more of an intuitive player, if you can call it like that. Now, let's finally go to the topic of finding practical ideas. Now, as you see here, there are anyway not many games in this position, but I assume if we play knight f6 now, there are many games with a transposition. So now, again, we are back to a more theoretical position. Now, in this game, I came up with a pretty smart preparation in general, because I knew that my opponent is most likely going to play this line. And I also knew that after knight e5, usually in those positions, if my knight is on f6 already, like for example here. Now, how white is usually playing nowadays is d3. And once black goes knight e5, then white goes knight e1. With the idea then to play f4, g4, g5. This is often the idea. For example, if black continues to develop like this, white often goes for something like this in those positions. And white might have a small advantage here. Now, the thing is, after knight e5, how my opponent continued. Let's copy the game in here, copy in notation. He played very logical. He played d3 with the same idea then to play knight e1, which also happened in the game, which I expected, I anticipated, because I think it's the very natural thing to do. But now the main difference is that I can develop my knight not to f6, but instead to e7 and then to c6. Which basically happened in the game, and now I got a pretty good version, and in the end, after a very long fight, managed to win the game. Now, this is a practical idea, because as you can see, or hopefully you can see, the engine is showing that white can play rook b1 here, and might have some chances to play for an advantage. Now, when choosing those ideas, you always, sometimes you need to go into some sort of gamble, which is that this is something I did in my game. I don't think my opponent is going to find rook b1 because I think it's a very difficult move to play. And now you need to understand how much you want to gamble or not. And this is a very subjective thing. I personally don't want to gamble that much because I don't really like to just risk something just for hoping that my opponent is not going to find it. In this case, it was more of a safe gamble, because even if he finds rook b1, he might have a small advantage, but the game goes on. There are other gambles where this is not necessarily the case, like where you sacrifice a piece in some King's Gambit, for example, some lolly attack or whatever it's called. I don't know, some line like this, yeah, what they used to play like 100 years ago. This, in my opinion, would be a gamble which I would not necessarily would like to go for. But this is a very subjective thing, which everyone has to figure out for themselves. Now, hopefully this was of some help. This is how I usually analyze, and just, Another important thing is not just to look at the engine. I have the engine down there. I'm not just looking there all the time. I'm not looking at the board. This is something also which you need to understand with more experience. Yeah, it's not always going to work, especially if the position is complicated. Your eyes are attracted to the engine, yeah, because everyone is lazy and no one wants to think for themselves if they have a very powerful engine next to them. But you should not forget about that. Like if you see some position and it looks strategically horrible, you have some double pawns and don't really understand why it can be playable, then either you abandon it or you try to understand it and try to analyze everything well and then make sure that it's actually playable, because you need to rely on your human intuition if a position can be played practically or not. And this is what it's about nowadays. With black, obviously, it's a little bit different than with white. In general, my experience with white is that it's generally a bit easier to come up with some playable ideas. Obviously not on the World Championship level, because people are in general extremely well prepared. But in general, you can get a game with white more easily. Like, for example, what people are doing now against Najdorf is to play bishop c4 and to get some sort of game. It also becomes more and more difficult to do so nowadays, but still with white, it's in general more easy to get a game for a fight than with black, because then with black, you often have to go to some bigger gamble, especially if your opponent is not trying to win the game, but steer it towards a draw. Okay, now always, if you're using a cloud engine, don't forget to always turn it off. Yeah, that was it for the chess-based part. Now I want to close it off in Lichess, which is the website I'm currently mostly using when it comes to following tournaments. Let's put this here. If you have any questions for the chess-based part, let me know in the comment section down below. I'll be happy to answer any one of them, because I don't know, I haven't seen a video on this topic before, and I think it could be quite useful for the people who are serious about improving in chess. Now, what I already said in many other videos, one of my biggest routines is to follow ongoing tournaments and to go through the games. And then a question appears, how do you go through the games? Should I use an engine or should I not use an engine? And now my current strategy on how to follow games is, especially if I'm doing it on Lichess, usually if you open the games, it is already sort of pre-analyzed, which means I'm not turning on the engine here. But I see this evaluation it's kind of like just the evaluation bar. This is what I'm using. You can also turn that off, but I don't think it's so practical. Like you can turn this eval bar off somehow in the settings. I'm not entirely sure now where. Should be somewhere here. Yeah? Evaluation gauge. You can turn it off, yeah? And the computer analysis as well. Now, if you're a hardcore improver and if you really have all the time in the world, then you can do that. You can just simply go through the games, all of the games by yourself. Especially last week, like you have German Bundesliga to follow, you have the Prague Masters to follow, you have American Cup to follow, whatever. If you have all of that time, then be my guest, do that. It's fantastic to study all of the games, but I fear that most of us don't have the time to do that. So I think the most practical solution is to use the evaluation gauge to go through the games. Now, what you can also do, sometimes I'm also lazy and do use the engine to go through it, but this will not give you as much improvement out of it than by just going through it with the evaluation gauge and still keeping in mind to have it like as a long-term solution. Probably the best is not to use an engine at all. This is something which Gelfand has often said, and I think it's a good thing, but at the same time, it's not always so practical to do it, I think, because it's not that sustainable for many people. And having this live eval bar here, I think makes it a bit more sustainable for most people. And then you can click through it. Okay, in the opening stage, usually nothing much happens. And then you see in this game, now I picked Caruana against Wesley So from yesterday. You see 97 is an inaccuracy, and I saw that yesterday. And then I tried to understand, okay, bishop takes f6 was good. You still see, okay, of course it's a critical move, otherwise black can play knight g6. G takes f6, d4, still a good move, also logical. c6, bishop e2, and Wesley played f5. And now this is nice when using Lichess, is that here you see that white made an inaccuracy, and the engine says d takes e5 is best. Now, why didn't Fabi play it? Is he a bad player? Certainly not. So we try to understand, if we want to improve, why didn't he go for d takes e5? Now, I already sort of went through it and afterwards checked it with an engine. What could be the specific reasons? Pretty sure that he was looking at d takes e4. Now, what can white do? E takes d6 might be something which you look at first, but then you can see that after knight d5, black is winning because the queen is attacked and also the knight on f3 is attacked, so black is winning a piece on the next move. Now, what else can be there? If the knight moves to d4, then black can take on e5 with a tempo. So maybe knight d2. Now, if d takes e5, white has two attractive options. They can take on e4 and take on e5. This was probably not what Fabi was contemplating. Maybe d5, but then white could, for example, castle queenside, and now this would be a position to closely examine. I don't know, if we like it and think that white is doing good here, then we can check it with the engine. Now, obviously, it's not completely fair because I already did, but I'm trying to guide you through my thinking process when it comes to that. Now, let's turn it on and we can check what was there. There's also knight d2, which apparently is pretty good. In the game, Fabi took e takes f5, which maybe he also evaluated as being good still for him. But d takes e5 was a bigger chance. F takes e4, knight d2. Yeah, as I said, this is not good. So knight d2 also maybe not an easy move to find in a game. Always going backwards with your pieces is not always so easy to understand. Now, what I said, d takes e5, okay, queen takes e5 should also be good, or knight takes e4, what I said, that assessment was correct, even though the engine claims that queenside castle is even stronger. And after d5, yeah, queenside castle. Maybe this is a position which is not so easy to evaluate. Now, if you want to go deeper here and try to understand the specific plans, then be my guest. Yeah, it's nice, but as I said, it's not always easy for everyone to spend so much time on any single position and any single game. So you need to keep it a sustainable solution. And here, okay, after analyzing a bit, then I understood that white probably goes for some plan with f3 or with f4 and should have a big advantage. Yeah? And you continue this same process throughout the game. Okay, you can also do it in a moment like this where the engine claims that white had an even better move. You can try to think and try to find it by yourself. But I think it's especially useful on at moments where one side made an inaccuracy or a blunder. Yeah. So here, okay, I'm not so sure what was the takeaway here. I mean, maybe that knight c8 is bad, and instead that b5 had to be played. Yeah, and then again you can spend some time and try to understand it. b5 not so easy for me to evaluate. First of all, white can maybe just take the pawn here. So that will be something which you can spend more time on. Perhaps black just wants to start contemplate with a4. Now, I'm just saying this in general. I think that people are often just going through the games purely with an engine and not then really looking at the chessboard. Perhaps some of you are already implementing this strategy, but I thought it was worth mentioning, and I think it's a method which can really help you improve without putting in that much work, I would say. I mean, anyway, many of you might be following all of the ongoing tournaments, at least from what I can tell reading the comments, most of you are. And I think if you make this small adjustment, it could be quite useful for your improvement in general. I have to be honest, sometimes I also don't do it. Sometimes I'm too tired, too lazy, or don't have the time to go through the game purely by my own. But we should not forget that this is, I believe, a pretty good training method. And this is all I wanted to say. Anyway, I hope this video was useful. Again, if you have any questions specifically about the chess-based part, don't hesitate to ask. I'll be happy to answer all of them. That was it for today. If you want to see more of me, go ahead to my website, felixbroberger.com. You can also find my courses linked down in the video description down below. And apart from that, I'm going to see you guys soon.